Hello, everybody, and welcome to another meeting of Akin Developers. We are so glad you guys were able to join us again. We see a lot of familiar faces. You guys are the best. We always have a good number, and we always have the same people that come every 2 weeks. So this week, we wanted to talk to a title company. So all you guys know that I am a real estate agent, so I deal with title companies a lot. Nita and I have worked, we've known each other for over a year. I think it's been like, over a year now. And she's done a lot of closing for my real estate side. But also, they do also, the general process of closing with title company is the same, whether it's for residential, commercial, or for investment properties. So I wanted them to come and talk to you guys because I told them in my group, there's some people that were lucky enough to do transactions. Others have not done transactions yet. But it's always good to have a title company come in and let us know what's going on, the process, but also there's a lot of changes that happened because of COVID, and there were some that were in progress. So we wanted to give them a chance to come and give us a little bit of information. So Nita is the person I've been working with, and she brought along Marvin, so they're going to introduce themselves. You guys take it away.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having us today. My name is Nita Young. I'm a business development officer for Stewart Title. I'm actually out of our Frederick, Maryland office, though we have offices throughout DC, Maryland, Virginia. We're in 42 states and 80 countries at this point. My background, as you probably saw if you read the bio, was in real estate. Started out with Long and Foster, went to Remax, and then managed a Keller Williams office. Transitioned more into a commercial end where Stewart was actually my client. And now, working as a business development officer for Stewart. And I brought along a friend of mine who I like to tag team with every once in a while, Marvin Reese, because he's such a wealth of information, having been in the industry he can tell you a little bit about himself, but he's been in the industry a long time and had been, been an ops manager for title. So if anybody knows title, Marvin does. Marvin, if you want to tell him a couple things about you.
Certainly. My name's Marvin Reese, Business Development Officer with Stewart Title as well. July made my 18th year in the industry. Previously held different roles, operations managers. Our prior title company was broken down slightly different, but managed customer service, vendor management, different aspects of the company. So yes, I've been around quite a long time. Stewart, love it. Great company, huge. It has a wide geographic footprint, so it gives us the flexibility to be able to support our clients in a variety of different places, Maryland, DC, Virginia, and across most of the United States, as well as the 80 countries, as Anita mentioned. What's unique is that I've been around the industry in a lot of different capacities. So I've originated loans before. I'm also an active real estate investor myself. So I'm sure we'll have some interesting conversations tonight that can bring you all some value. But looking forward to the presentation tonight, and hopefully again we can bring you all some value.
I'm going to try to share my screen. It looks like I can. Everybody seeing that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So, this is where anytime I'm doing a presentation, it is very informal. So feel free to ask any questions along the way that you all may have, but I'm going to ask you a question up front. How many of you know what a title company is, what we do? Any ideas? Nobody?
I'm not going to say anything because I'm already in the business. I want to see what people are going to say.
Okay.
I mean, basically, a title company will check to make sure the property that you're purchasing is clear, doesn't have any, or will let you know if there's any liens or things of that nature on it. So you want to go to a title company at least for that purpose. There may be other things, but that's the principal purpose.
Okay.
Go to a title company.
This is Greg from Los Angeles. I was saying that a title company does research of the chain of title all the way back as far as it can go, and also ensure that when you're buying property, you're buying property with no defects in the title and as far as title insurance, both for the buyer and also for the lender.
Oh, anybody else? Marvin, you always use that football analogy. How do you put it?
Hey, look, so this one, this gets my blood going. So both of those were great answers, by the way. Yes, our primary responsibility is to ensure that the buyer is taking free and clear title to that property. That's our primary and sole responsibility. It's a lot of other steps we take along the way, but that's number one. As the second gentleman said, yes, we searched the chain of title. We actually go back 60 years. It's considered a full title search. So we're looking to ensure that that property has properly changed hands from seller to buyer and so forth and so on over that past 60-year chain. To ensure there's no defects and we can issue a title policy, and then you have the peace of mind that you have free and clear property. Of course, everything isn't perfect, so if things aren't recorded of land records, we can't account for them, which is the reason for title insurance, to protect you against hidden risk. We'll talk about that more in the transaction, but to Nita's point, when I do these presentations, I always tell everybody the title company and the real estate transaction is like the offensive tackle. Nobody pays us any attention or worries about us until the quarterback gets sacked, right? You know, we have a significant part of the process, but we're kind of behind the scenes for the most part, especially to the buyer, until we get to the closing table. We'll reach out on the front end and get some information we may need about how to set up the deed, etc. But for the most part, we're behind the scenes to the buyer until it's time to go to closing. So that's why I said we're like that offensive tackle that nobody pays attention to until the quarterback gets sacked, because we're invisible for the most part. So.
That is very, very true. And even though we're invisible, you know, this next thing, I'm going to ask you another question. You know, when I found this out my own self, I found it interesting. But feel free to answer this. Don't be ashamed if you think you may not have the right answer. Just go ahead and blurt it out. But I'm going to ask you a question. How many or what percentage of transactions do you all think has some sort of title issue on it?
You want to say out of 100 a month?
Out of 100%, what percent do you think has title issues?
At least 80%.
20%.
You think 80% of the deals out there have an issue with title?
20%.
I would say about maybe 40%.
I think about 40%.
40, I heard 20.
I know 10. 10?
20.
20?
50%.
Now, it sounds like you guys are running into some issues already. That's why we're getting these answers.
As an investor, trust me, I'm talking from an investor standpoint. Woof.
Well, it's not 80. Somebody said 40. They were probably the closest. So according to American Land Title Institute, 36% of them, so about a third, have some sort of title issue affecting them. And our job is, you know, we were talking earlier, is to find these things and fix them. You know, it's funny, I was getting ready to go into a closing, or well, it was about a week or so before the closing, and the gentleman said to me, I don't need any title insurance because your job is to find all the issues. And I said, well, good luck with that. I'd love to say that that's the case, that we always find things pop up after the fact. Heck, especially right now with COVID and being that the courthouses weren't open, you know, there are things that haven't been recorded, you know, from March since COVID has started. So, you know, we do our best to find every single thing that's visible to us. But what about the things that are hidden? And that's what title insurance is for. So sometimes, like I said, the problems are not detected. So that's where that's going to come in. So, but we're going to talk about that a little bit more in detail in some of the upcoming slides. Marvin, you want to talk about some of the common problems we do see?
Yeah, and I'll talk about that. And also, somebody made the comment as an investor, you know, so I'm just going to piggyback on that last comment. And, you know, I like this format because it's very interactive. But, you know, from an investor standpoint, you probably do hear of more title issues than, say, a residential property that somebody's buying as a homeowner. And that's because as an investor, you're usually looking for a deal, a short sale, or a property that's been foreclosed on, or maybe it's in Baltimore. I'm in the Towson, Maryland area, so I'm in Baltimore County, and a lot of investors go into the city and they buy these shells, and they've been sitting. And yes, those properties, those diamonds in the rough that you look at as a good deal because you can make a nice profit off of it, are the properties that have a ton of problems or typically have more problems with them. So as an investor, you may find that you see a lot more title issues with the property. And to that point, title issues, common problems, Nita has the screen displayed here. It's not always stuff that you can't find, because those hidden risks are the reasons you need title insurance. It's often stuff that can be resolved, but it's still a title problem that has to be cleared. Common issue are paid unreleased liens. That's one of the most commons. Somebody's refinanced, the old mortgage has been paid off, but the lender hasn't properly released it of record. That's an issue. It has to be cleared. It has to be removed from record before that buyer can have free and clear ownership to the property. The seller not vested in title. We've seen cases where people thought that they were the owner of the property because of a parent passing or what have you, thinking they automatically take ownership, and that's not necessarily the case. The estate may have to go through probate to determine an administrator of the estate, and then determine the heirs and determine who the property gets deeded to. Maybe they go through the probate process and the deed given the heirs was never recorded. So a ton of things out there. Seller is deceased. That's a common one because, again, it's going to require probate to happen. You got federal tax liens, judgments, warrants, lawsuits, pending lawsuits, more particularly, housing code violations. If anybody's done any work, Baltimore County, Baltimore City, we got to pull a lien certificate to determine if there's any permit issues, citations, code violations, etc. Mechanics liens. People can say if you got a contractor coming in doing work on your home, and they can put liens against the property if you haven't paid, and sometimes that stuff can show up after the fact. So another common one, if you have a LLC and that LLC isn't in good standing with the state, then if a deed's been done and that LLC wasn't in good standing, the prior title company didn't do their diligence to confirm they were in good standing with the state, then that deed was invalid. So that it's a ton of different title related issues out there that could cloud title, and we have to work to clear. This page here just gives us a handful of the common ones that we see on a regular basis.
So, if everything was accounted for, as I said earlier, we would not need title insurance. And trust me, we try to do everything we can to find the issues that exist. Some of the hidden risks, I'm not going to hit on every single one of them, but sometimes it can be just an improperly recorded document. It could be off by a letter or a number or whatever, and we're selling now the house next door instead of the actual house that it is, which is not okay. I've seen that numerous times. So now we got to get that worked out. Or, a judgment was filed, lien was filed against property A. You're actually selling property B, but they actually filed it against property B. It was intended for property A. So, our job is to get in there and try to figure this stuff out and get it cleared up and hopefully get it to closing as quickly as possible. But when you're starting to deal with foreclosures and things of that sort, you're going to find more issues, than, the standard transaction. I just had one, I'm going to sidetrack for just a second. We're still trying to get this to closing. Unfortunately, I think it's a combination of things that happen. And some balls dropped by title companies as well. But in this particular situation, there was a foreclosure case against the owner, the prior owner, for the deed of trust that was never recorded. The deed of trust was executed by someone who was never on the title, and not in fact, there was actually, they were an attorney in fact for the title holder, but the power of attorney was never recorded. So we have nothing to reflect that they even had the means to close this. So you start all this stuff. It's like one issue after another popping up behind it. So the power of attorney was not recorded in the land records to give the person the right to sell this property, to sign it over. There were recordation issues that were not corrected, even addressed in the foreclosure, but yet they sold it at auction. So it was sold without it even having any clear title. There were tons of issues that existed that should have been rectified. Now, case like this, like, we're not going to close this until we have cleared up every single thing behind this. And that's why you want to have someone like Stewart on your side. You could have forgery, fraud. My aunt and I look a lot alike, and I could see this honestly happening. She's a little bit older than I am, but I could probably show up to sign for her, and if no one was paying any attention, and this has happened, I'm telling this because it's a true story. They showed up to sign for their relative because they looked a lot alike. And that was not, in fact, the person who was the owner of the house. Or you got the girlfriend who shows up in place of the wife, and is selling the property on behalf of the wife. I mean, there's so many things that happen. Horror stories, you always have to hope it's not on to you, but it does happen. So, I just mentioned the expired, the power of attorney wasn't recorded. It wasn't necessarily in that case that it was expired, but it wasn't even recorded. So that person, in fact, didn't have the right to sell that property. Something was wrong in the public records. There's a number of things. And that's why you want to have title insurance in place to protect you. And because a house is one of the biggest investments you're gonna make of anything else that you're gonna buy.
And I always, just to expand on that, Nita, so she's touched on a lot of great things, and we've seen a lot over the years, but I always put it into perspective. An owner's insurance policy is completely optional. You don't have to purchase it. But just as Nita was telling the gentleman in her earlier example, yes, anything that we can find of record or abstractors find, we can typically account for, and we gotta account for it and get it cleared to be able to get you to the closing table. But the hidden risk, if it's a misindex, it could be as simple as there's a lien or judgment that's misindexed, so the abstractor doesn't find it. And guess what? That's a hidden risk that's out there that'll pop up down the line and cause you headaches and hassles if you don't have that owner's policy. So, my real estate attorney recently retired, and he's been in the industry. He was in it for 43, 44 years, and he told me he had never seen a case where anybody who's had any of these issues pop up in the past, where the court says taking the property from them or what have you once they purchased it. But he's seen where they've had to spend a lot of money out of pocket with real estate attorneys, et cetera, going to court trying to defend and protect themselves and keep the home. So I always put it into perspective for any of my buyers, whether it's investors, first-time homeowners, or somebody who's upgrading to their dream home. You wouldn't go to the car dealership and buy a $80,000 Mercedes-Benz and leave off the lot without gap insurance and take that risk. We never want anything to happen. God forbid something happens. We never want that to happen. But that's the purpose of insurance, to protect you from things that may happen. And there's definitely a bunch of potential for hidden risk with the title insurance world. So just something to keep in the back of the mind. And I just wanted to expand on what Nita was saying just slightly.
There was a question, what about vacant property tax liens and fees? Is that going to be outside of, is it outside of what you guys usually find? Is there something different? Because I know in some states and some jurisdictions, they have a fee for vacant properties that's separate from just like the regular tax fees or liens or anything like that.
No, in this area, I'm not familiar with any vacant property tax fees, but if it's any kind of state or federal tax liens, that should be identified. When we pull public records, we're also doing Maryland judiciary searches as well. So if there's any liens or judgments filed, whether it's state tax liens, federal tax liens, or just a mechanic's lien, it should be reflected in the abstractor's work, and then we need to get that accounted for. Again, our whole focus is making sure that you, the buyer, are taking free and clear ownership. So if there's any liens out there, you're not taking free and clear ownership of the property.
And I could be wrong on this. I'm not, Marvin and I are licensed title producers in the state of Maryland, but I think there is something like that in DC. I remember hearing one of my clients who I work with, who is licensed in DC as well as in Maryland, having a situation similar to, was that you, Aisha, who asked about that?
I don't know if it was, I spoke to you about that, but I can't remember at the top of my head, and they'll come back to me later, but I know they have a vacant tax. So there's some jurisdiction to discourage people from abandoning the properties. They have an extra fee or tax, and it's a penalty. It's like some crazy, it could be DC, some sector.
I think it is DC. We don't
Where
have
it's like 10 or 20%, something crazy.
DC has a 10, DC has a blighted property
That's
tax along, there's also a vacant property. And sometimes you have to fight it, and which I've done, because I was working on a house that was going on the market, and they were saying it was vacant. I said, of course it's vacant, but it's, being renovated. Here's the building permit, and once it was listed, they could see that it was listed, so they took that status off. But if they think that the property is vacant, I think vacant property is a 5% tax. And a blighted property is 10%, which in DC, with the values of the properties, can be extremely high.
Yeah, but
luckily
if it's
we don't
anything
have
against that property, it should definitely be showing up in the title work and has to be accounted for.
Yes, absolutely.
So full disclosure, there's a few agents in the group.
No,
She's one of them, even though she didn't say it, she's an agent.
And that's what I was saying. One of the real estate agents that I work with, and I don't think it was you, it was somebody else. They ran into that situation and on one of the deals that we were closing. And I believed it was DC. That's why I was saying, I think that's in DC. We don't have anything like that in Maryland, but to what Marvin was saying, it should show up in the search. When the abstractor does the search, it should show up that it exists.
Especially if it's tax related. I've never heard of a case where something like that wouldn't show up with the searches that's being performed.
Absolutely. So I know, Marvin was saying, and I want to piggyback on something he was saying a second ago. He was like, you wouldn't go buy a car, though I did, without gap insurance. And I kicked myself numerous times because 15 months later I had a car accident, and I had to pay the difference between, what was owed and what the car was worth, and then turn around and get another car too on top of it. So, we make decisions. Sometimes we come back to regret. I'll tell you this much, a lender is not going to give you a loan without protecting them. So I'm like, why would you not protect yourself? And I like stories because, real life stories, and to share that because it just tells you, what is happening in the world. And one of the lenders that I work with, he had a friend who was buying new construction, and his friend, I'm sorry, it just started like pouring down raining here, if you guys are hearing that. One of his friends was buying new construction, told him, there's no way in the world I'm buying title insurance. I don't need it. It's new. Nobody's lived there. We're the first people buying this house. But he said, look, somebody owned that land before the builder bought that land. And he was joking with him. He said, you never know, it could be like an Indian reservation land, it's their reserve land, and you're not supposed to be touching it. And come to find out, he went ahead and bought it, thank goodness. His joke turned into reality. And it turned out that it was, that belonged to the Indians. And it ended up being that all those people had to move out of the property. It was absolutely insane. And the fact that he even talked this into existence was insane. But his friend was protected because he did have title insurance. So, like I said, I like sharing real stories because this is stuff that people have gone through. There's other people who didn't get it, who thought like he did. They've taken a loss on one of their biggest investments, unfortunately. We were talking about, homeowners insurance and, other types of insurance like gap insurance. When you're getting auto insurance, it's because of something that might happen. Homeowners insurance, because your house may burn down or your floor might go soft and your toilet might almost fall through to the garage, i.e. that happened to me. So, I mean, you're buying these things. I've had a few things happen, unfortunately. But you're buying these things in the event that something does happen, health insurance, because you might get sick, you might break your arm. But title insurance actually works the complete opposite, because you're paying for what may happen in the future. And this is protecting you against what happened in the past that we didn't know what the heck, we didn't know anything about it. So, and that hidden risk again, and that's why I think it is so, so important. Marvin, you
It
want to
is
talk a little bit?
storming behind you, Anita. I can
It's
hear it.
really
We can
bad.
hear
Can you
it.
see it? It's like if I lose you guys, Marvin, you may have to finish it, because I can't believe how it's like thunder and lightning and
No worries, no worries, no worries. Yeah, so this next slide, folks, is just piggybacking what Nita said on the prior slide. Title insurance is the only insurance out there that's protecting against what has already happened. And let's think about that. In theory, you know, once you buy the property, whether you're an investor, or you're gonna own or occupy the property or what have you, if there's anything against you, you're gonna know about it. So you're responsible for it. But anything that's happened previously, you're not going to know about, you shouldn't be responsible for, and that's what title insurance is for, to protect you against what's already happened and what's out there. So it's the only insurance that doesn't protect you against a contingency. It doesn't protect you against a future risk. It protects you against what's happened in the past, and it acts as a guarantee of the title company's work. Hey, let's be realistic. We got abstractors who pull in public records. Human error factor. It happens. We all want it to be a perfect world, but things do happen. So, you know, now here's the other interesting thing that I want to piggyback on that Nita said earlier. You know, you're paying for an insurance policy to protect that lender. Anytime there's a lender involved, I call it the cost of doing business. They won't loan you the money without you paying for a policy for them. But guess what? If something comes up, you can't file a claim against their insurance policy. That only protects the lender. So if you don't have that owner's policy to protect you, it leaves you exposed. I think we're pretty good on this slide, Nita. I think we drove that point home that this is protecting against what's happened in the past. This next slide here, I'll take this one too and give you a break, Nita. So this is kind of, I call it the wheel. This kind of takes you through from start to finish the process of what the title company does. And from our side, it all starts at the ratification. Once that contract's ratified, the agent, or if you're an investor and you're working with the title company directly, don't have an agent involved, etc. Once you get that contract ratified, typically you're going to send us the earnest money deposit. In most cases, some cases it's held with the brokerage or what have you. But once we get over that ratified contract and the earnest money deposit, that's going to kick off our process. You know, first step is we're gonna send out that abstract, a report, and a request to have them to go out and complete that title search for us. Again, we require them to do a full title search, which is they're going to search public records back 60 years and put us together a chain of title showing us that the property is properly changed hands, identifying all open liens and judgments, encroachments, assessments, restrictions, you know, anything that's going on with that property, the abstract is supposed to be pulling and providing us. Next, the examination, and that's where all the fun and the magic happens. We have some great processors here at Stewart Title behind the scenes. They are all on site. We don't sub or work out to any third parties or anything like that. So we have access to our processors, which is great, but they're going to take that raw abstract and they're going to go in and examine it to determine what they have to account for, what has to be cleared, what has to be removed, so that the buyer's taking free and clear ownership to the property. Step 4, Baltimore, again, I use that as an example, Baltimore County, Baltimore City, the non-public record checks. We got to pull that lien certificate that's telling us, hey, has there been any permit issues? Somebody did some work on the house, added an addition, but there wasn't a permit. And hey, that's an issue out there. It could be a permit issue against the house. It could be a code violation for, you know, the prior owners not keeping the grass to a certain level or leaving lids off trash cans, and those permit issues, those code violations turn into liens against the property that have to be paid. So that non-public records check happens as well. And between that and the public records check, it gives us a full picture of what we have to account for. At that point, we're going to start working with the lender to perfect the documents. It usually starts off with the lender providing us a CD or closing disclosure. In the cash world, it's going to be a HUD settlement statement. And our processors are going to work with the lender to go in. We're going to account for all of the title related fees, that being our title company specific fees, all the governmental costs, such as your transfer, your recordation taxes, your recordation stamps, the fees to record the deed, to record the mortgage, etc. We plug in everything that we're responsible for. The lender's plugging in all they're responsible for, and we're going to go back 2 or 3 times until we have that CD or that HUD perfected so that the numbers match on both sides. That's how we know that everything's accounted for and everybody's ready to move forward with the transaction and get it to the closing table. Step 5, that's what everybody's getting excited about. We want to get to the closing table. We want it to be a smooth transaction. We want to close out the process. We want everything to go well at closing, explain the documents to our buyers, ensure they understand it, get all of their questions answered. And at the end of the process, we want to do a little celebrating. We want to, celebrate the joy of home ownership. An investor or an owner occupant, again, it's a celebration because home ownership is a very big and important thing, no matter how you look at it. And last but not least, we got some back-end steps that we're going to take. We're going to send recordables to the county or to the city or whatever the jurisdiction is to get those recorded. That's giving the buyer the ownership to the property by way of the deed, and the lender's lien against the property if a lender is involved, and that's getting that mortgage recorded, or any grants, if any grants are associated to the transaction. There's usually deeds of trust with the grants as well. Really, soup to nuts, that's a high-level overview of the title process. Again, there's a ton that goes in from step 1 to step 7. It's a lot that happens behind the scenes, but that is a pretty thorough overview of what we're doing in the transaction as far as title is concerned. Maybe we take a step here, Anita, and let's see if we have any more questions before we move on to the next one.
So I have a question. If everything is clear and there hasn't been any issue with the property, if everything goes smoothly, how long does it take to go from step 1 to the closing table?
Let's say 6 months ago, I would say cash transaction, no lender. We were knocking them out the park in 2 weeks. In today's world, with the low interest rates and the influx of volume that's in, we're going to expand that out another week to 2 weeks because getting something to the table in 2 weeks is pretty tough right now. Just because our industry, it's I can't say record numbers, but it's got to be up there. It's really booming right now. So just from a capacity standpoint, it's going to slow that process down just a little bit. But again, too, like I said, a lot of it depends on if it's a lender involved or if it's a cash purchase. When it's a cash purchase and everything's clear, I mean, it can really be a quick process, really quick process.
It can. I've had more and more real estate agents, so as of late, telling me if there is a lender involved, they're given a 45-day window to close, just because even the lenders have been so bogged down. Many times they've had us push dates just because they're not in a position to close. They don't have the appraisal. There's things they're missing in order to be able to get us to the closing table.
Hi, Aisha, it's Rupert. I have a quick question. Hello?
Sure, Ruben.
So what about auction properties? How does it work? Where in some auction properties, the auctioneer in their contract says that they have researched the title and the title is clear. Is that correct? Or we still have to do a separate title search?
So, I mean, I've actually closed on a couple of auction properties and my processors handled them. And in those cases, we still did the title work and all. So I'm sure there's probably some cases out there where there may have already been title work done. If that's the case, I'm thinking that the auctioneer is making a play to use their preferred title company because somebody's already done something. It's not likely going to be the auctioneer or the auction company that's done the title work. They've engaged, they probably got their own title company and they've done the legwork on the front end so that they can get you to the closing table quicker on the back end. But no matter auction property, or you're buying through a real estate agent, or you're buying straight out, or however you're purchasing, title work always has to be done to determine what's out there against the property and make sure it's getting cleared.
So I have a question. This is Maurice. So I'm refinancing some properties. They're rental properties. I have them in LLCs, but the lender wants me to take them out of the LLC to put them into my name to do the refinancing. And then then I can put them back into the LLC. Two questions. One, do you think it would be best for me to get an attorney to do that, or could I do it myself? And two, what would be the title work with respect to that? Am I going to have to do title work on both sides of that transaction? Or?
So not necessarily title work on both sides of the transaction. And it's curious that you mentioned that. I'm going to follow up to that with a question on my own as to why the lender's having you to do that. Yeah. But long story short, if you go that route, the title work's going to be done on the front end to get the loan done. Then on the back end, you just have a deed putting the property back into the LLC. Yeah, okay. Now in Maryland, I mean, anywhere, anytime you can do what's called a quick claim deed and put it on record. But in Maryland, deeds are supposed to be signed off on by an attorney. And so to Stewart's point, we don't do deeds standalone outside of a real estate transaction because it's considered the practice of law, and we're not a law firm, we're a title company. If we're preparing deeds through a real estate transaction, we don't have that same requirement. So yes, to answer your question on the back end, you would want to work with a local title attorney, not necessarily local, but a title attorney to get those deeds done to move the property back into the LLC. Now, for personal reasons, why is it that the lender is requiring you to take it out of the LLC to refinance? Is it just from a rates perspective? Because you're going to get a lot better rate if you refinance it individually versus in the LLC. So was it that from that perspective, or help me understand that?
Well, yeah, I didn't ask that question for this particular lender, but this particular lender is a credit union. So my assumption was, a lot of times credit unions have great rates, but they also have a lot of restrictive policies.
That's right.
So I was thinking, and I didn't ask the question, I will, but I was thinking that, they don't deal with businesses so much. So when
that's right.
Their books,
that's what I was thinking.
When I refinance it, it's as an individual, and they don't care what happens after I, have it refinanced. But that was my thought. But I'll ask that question just to see.
And I was thinking that either they're trying to really get you the best rate possible and you get a much better rate as an individual than a business, or they don't do business loans. And make sure you find out if there's any, because in the deeds of trust, they have what's called a pay on demand clause, which is a lot of lenders, if you transfer a title, too soon, it's going to trigger you to have to pay that mortgage in full. So be sure to ask the lender. A lot of lenders will say you got to wait 90 days, and after that, you're good to go. But be sure to ask them, how long do you need to wait before you transfer it back into your LLC to make sure you don't trigger any on-demand clauses to make you have to pay that mortgage in full.
And what did you call that?
And if I can add to that, it's the due on sale clause. Okay. And what they do is, if you transfer it as an individual back to LLC, they do random checks. I mean, they don't check every single loan, so they could just not flag you. But I know of somebody who got flagged. The bank sent a letter saying you need to put it back under your personal name. They did that, waited a few months, and then transfer it back on the LLC, and they just never checked it. I'm not saying you should do that. I'm not, I'm on camera too. I'm just saying, you just gotta, like Marvin is saying, ask them why they want to do it, and ask them what if they're, is there a period, they're really just trying to refinance you. They don't really care what you do after the fact, especially the loan officer. But you have to be mindful of the penalties. That's what I was just going to add.
Mm-hmm. If I may,
I would definitely encourage you to go and have someone else, outside of the credit union, take a look at that. I know I belong to a credit union. Typically, they have pretty good rates. But right now, I mean, rates are really competitive across the board. So I would go look and see what else out there exists.
Yeah, I am. I'm looking at some other ones as well. But that was, they've already kind of gave me all their parameters and gave me thumbs up. But I'm looking at some other financial institutions as well.
Okay.
But Maurice, I think you're heading down the right path because I was waiting for us to get into the investor part of the conversation because I also have rental properties and I'm looking to do that on a lot of mine. Refinance them personally to get that super low rate, and then within 3 to 6 months move them into the LLC to take that liability off of me.
Yes. Okay, thanks so much.
Any other questions?
Carlos here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Just to follow on Marie's question, I'm actually on the same process right now. I got some rentals. I'm cashing out on them. I got them on the LLC. And yes, the lender wants them to transfer under my name just for the better rates. I did ask that question. My question to you is when I move them from the LLC to my name, will Maryland hit me with a transfer tax just like a regular sale?
I'm pretty sure that would qualify as an exemption. Now, if you do it 2 or 3 times, I think you're going to get hit with it. But I know there's a lot of exemptions with that transfer tax, like parents to child, child to parents. I think business to individual may be exempt too. We can confirm that and circle back to you, Carlos. So if we can get your contact information, but I'm pretty sure my attorney that I was telling you about that retired, I was talking to him before he retired about my properties because I was looking to do some shifting around, and he said he was pretty sure that that's an exempt transfer. If they can see that you're the person in the LLC, say the sole owner, or you're one of the members or what have you, and so that LLC is yours, that should be an exempt transfer.
Got it. Thank you.
I think I've asked that question before, and again, don't quote me. And the answer I got previously was that you could do it one time, and then after that they charge you. So you were able to do it one time, but after you just expect to be charged.
Awesome. That's similar to what my attorney was saying. Like if you do it once, it should be exempt.
I see. Perfect. Thank you so much.
I had a question about, when you're ready to buy a property and your seller wants their title company, but you want your title company. And so, you basically, the transaction is done by those 2 title companies.
Right.
What is it, how does the process work? Because every time that we've done that, it's been very long. Like it will take us like 2 months to close, like even more than that. And for me, it wasn't efficient at all. But at the same time, we wanted to work with our title company because we didn't trust the other guy's title company.
Virginia's big on doing that. I think a lot of deals happen in Virginia like that. It's much smoother, in my opinion, if it's one, because you're relying on them to communicate with each other, disclosure of information to going back and forth between each other. Ideally to have one is my personal opinion. Marvin, you can say if you feel any differently.
I agree too. And I've actually had, because I'm business development. So I work with my agents and try to get them to direct the title work to me on the seller side when they have listings as well. However, I'll tell any of my agents, if the buyers are going to use their title company and not willing to use your title company, then it's no need for you to engage me as well, because you're going to, in essence, in my opinion, and just my humble opinion, but the seller is going to pay a lot more fees by engaging their title company to do the same thing that the buyer's title company is doing anyway. Only thing the seller's title company does is prepare the deed, and they want to double check our title work. That's the whole point of title insurance, So in my opinion, I don't see that as a benefit to the seller by using their own title company, but it does happen occasionally. I probably see it 1 out of every 15 files, but it does happen. I don't recommend it. I don't see a benefit in that.
If I can say something, from the both sides, right? So as a resident, real estate side, I do understand your point, because most title company are honest, and most of them are, you guys have fiduciary duties, you're bound by the law and, code of ethics, just like us for estate agent. But that being said, as an investor, we have done deals and we've used the seller's title company or wholesaler's title company, and they find out later that the taxes weren't paid. They had to come out of pocket. Then we had to pay this year's taxes, which we didn't want to because we were going to pay the property and just get it out. It just turned out to be such a big hoopla that we have a deal with a title company where they pretty much review the documents. So we don't pay them for the full title work. We just give them like a little fee just to review and make sure all the paperwork is correct. So this is something I would suggest to all the other investors. Just have somebody check it, and we use them as pretty much our real estate lawyer to check that all the title work and the binder is correct. And even a transaction we just closed last week, he really forced that title company to get everything done on time. And we were delayed because he's like, I am not closing and disbursing funds until you guys give me the full title binder. And if we had relied on that seller's title company, they would have just done the stuff quickly. And then later on, we would have found out that they're dragging their feet and not recording it. The day they were supposed to record, they recorded the next day. So just my opinion from what we've seen of all the investment side dealing with, especially with wholesalers, it's been, I would recommend having somebody else check the paperwork and the title.
For your people, they're following up after the fact to make sure everything's been recorded and done properly as well?
Yes, well, yeah, they do check it. So basically they make sure all the title paperwork is done, and then we will follow up with them and they follow up. But the one that I'm referring to was a double close in Virginia. In Virginia, you can record the deed electronically, but they didn't record the date they were supposed to record. So we did sign the paperwork, but the money was not released until we saw that they recorded the deed and gave the full title binder, because there was a tax lien on the property. So our title guy made sure, because he's just like our attorney. He reviewed and made sure that everything was in place. Then he dispersed the funds. So the wholesaler had to wait and pester his title company, who was just slacking, until everything was done. Then he got his money. So he had to work for his money. And that was on him. So, that's why I would recommend having somebody review the paperwork, especially when you're dealing with a wholesaler.
Anybody else? Marvin, I think we could probably breeze quickly through the last two slides or so. Because, most of you, it sounds like have some experience in this world, so you probably are aware of the closing disclosure. Back in October 2016, they introduced TRID, and so they have to give you 3 days prior to be able to review the documentation. What the costs are going to be to you. So. If you have questions on it, I always say that's the time to reach out and get it fixed. If there's an error, get it fixed on that end. And then, and like I said, I'm just going to quickly breeze through this, is funding. So one thing I always say, people quite often don't give themselves enough time at closing. Things don't always go as planned. I always, I had one just the other day. She was like, I'm glad I took off the day. The lender didn't have the docs in time. She was supposed to close at a certain time. I ended up calling her a few hours later to say, hey, we're ready to close now. We just got your documents in. If I can give any bit of advice is, not to have a bunch of stuff planned for that day, really making, the closing day a priority for you. Our job, as part of, title is to disperse funds. We're gonna make sure, that last water bill gets paid. We're gonna make sure that the seller's mortgage gets paid off. We're gonna make sure, if there were liens, that they're taken care of. So that's a large part of our job. That's kind of why I was also asking you, Aisha, are they looking at at these things after the fact to make sure these things were done. Because unfortunately, sometimes we see that it's not been done. It's not been recorded. Something didn't get paid off, though they were supposed to have paid it, though they held money to pay it. Unfortunately, stuff happens. It's mistakes. I don't know carelessness. I'm not sure what you may want to call it, but it does happen. So these are all things to keep in mind when you're choosing a company. Are they going to take care of these things? Can I trust them with these things? So we're going to go through all the documents, explain and answer any questions that you have on the day of closing, reference to the lender's docs, or even documents associated with title. And if you're refinancing, you all do have a 3-day right of rescission to change your mind. And typically, most lenders have a form that you sign off on, and it'll say you have till midnight on such and such a date, to cancel this. And we do not pay, no money gets dispersed, no checks get handed out, because I get this question often with the refinances. Am I getting my check today? No, because you could still change your mind. So we are not going to disperse any funds until that rescission period is over on that. So just a few things I wanted to hit on. I don't know if there's anything else with that, Marvin, that you wanted to add.
No, I think you covered that pretty perfectly. So being around for a while, folks, I can take you back to the painstaking days of when TRID hit and they went from the HUD to the closing disclosure. That was really brutal. Every lenders had to get systems changed over and all of that good stuff. So it was some fun times. But I can say this, I think it was one of the best changes that our industry has made. It made the documents a lot easier to read and understand as a consumer, but more importantly, giving you that 3-day window to get the CD ahead of time, to have the opportunity to review and be able to go to your lender, ask some questions about the documents and the numbers. It may not be the final numbers, but it should be at least ballpark. And that way you can get your questions answered and you can come to the closing table with peace of mind. So as Nita was saying, be mindful that sometimes the things don't happen right on time with the closing, if it's delays from lenders or whatever's the case on docs. So give yourself plenty of time. You want it to be a good joyous occasion. You don't want to be having to rush back to work or something like that and put yourself in a bad situation. But for the most part, I think you covered it well, Anita. And I'm going to jump forward. I see Gwen sent us a message asking about the average cost for title work. I don't necessarily know. I guess I could break it down into a average cost, but I'll say this for Stewart Title. Mm-hmm. We are a flat $1,000 for title work in the state of Maryland. Whether you're buying a $800,000 house that you're going to occupy yourself, or if it's a $25,000 shell in Baltimore City. We have a set amount that we have to put in place to cover our cost of doing business, and that's our flat fee for title work in Maryland. Of course, all the other variables such as the governmental cost and title insurance and all of that, most any company you use, all of that's going to be the same because the insurance is regulated. It's going to be right around ballpark, and the governmental fees, everybody uses the same calculation. So, if you want to use that number to put a price in place and get a percentage, a flat $1,000 for title work in Maryland.
I have some questions, but I'll leave it open first to other people. But I do have a few questions and maybe a few clarification as well. Anybody else has a question?
I had a quick question on the title insurance. I've used a couple different title companies and I seem to get different pricing. How's that? Is it that set based on the purchase price of the property? How's that usually calculated?
Yeah, it's based on the sales price, and if you go to 2 or 3 different title companies, they all should be within a few dollars apart because it's pretty much regulated. So if you're seeing a big difference, then that means the title companies are quoting you different policy types. Like as a consumer, you can get a basic policy or you can get an enhanced policy. The basic policy is going to cover all of your stuff that's happened prior to you taking ownership to that property. That enhanced policy is a lot more in depth. For instance, Most lenders don't require you to get survey coverage anymore. We don't require you to get a survey either, but that enhanced policy offers survey coverage to a buyer. So if there's some kind of encroachment from say a neighbor's garage is encroaching on your property line or what have you, your title insurance and that enhanced policy gives you coverage for survey related items. It also gives you coverage for items such as somebody goes and fraudulently prepares a deed. It's saying you signed off selling the property. So it gives you coverage from some things that happens in the future now as well. So if you're seeing a big difference in price, that's more than likely what's happening. Somebody's quoting you the enhanced price and somebody's quoting you the basic policy price.
Makes sense.
And while you're talking to enhance, I do want to just piggyback on that just for a second, because the enhance also covers the appreciation of the property up to a certain percentage for up to the first 5 years. So as your property is growing in value, it's not going to be, the policy is not going to be whatever you purchased it at. It's going to cover beyond that as the value increases in your property. So that's one of the pluses, because our hope is that the house does increase in property. So you want to be able to cover up to, whatever that number might be.
Got it. Thank you so much. That clarifies it. Yeah.
Anybody else?
I have a question. So my question is more I need to understand if, with all those different titles company, like what is their legal obligation? Like when they don't do their job per se, like when things are not recorded on time and you have to go after them, like you're the one going and asking, hasn't been recorded, do we have this done? And like what do they have?
Liable? Are they liable for the?
That one's, I've never been asked that question before, so that one's interesting. That's a good one. I would say anybody can be legally obligated to anything these days if you obtain an attorney and you bring forth a lawsuit. But again, as a title company, we have a fiduciary responsibility to ensure that we're representing the contract. So not necessarily the seller or the buyer, we're representing the contract. We're getting that buyer free and clear title to the property. We're getting the deeds recorded. We're getting mortgages paid off. We're getting everything done with that transaction. That's just our responsibility. And, we have licensing and, we can lose licenses if things don't happen correctly. We're reported into MLTA, et cetera, et cetera. So I would say that there are some obligations. I can't say that anything legally that, we don't do it, that you can legally say, go to the title company and get this, that, or the third. But we do have responsibilities to ensure that the process is being, the integrity of the process is being maintained and everything that we're engaged to do is being done, just from our licensing perspective, et cetera, et cetera.
Go ahead, Colleen.
I'll just make a comment about what Mickey was just asking about. Several years ago, I was asked to represent a seller. And as I was asking for information, I was checking the records to make sure that was the seller of the property. He was the real owner. And it turned out that he had purchased the property from his uncle and used the title company, where the title attorney never did what he was supposed to do and absconded with funds. So the title attorney ended up going to jail, but that's, so there is some kind of recourse on something like that. And the person that I was representing, or I never really fully represented him because we never got that issue resolved because the person went to jail. But there is recourse for people when the title company doesn't do what they're supposed to do, but somebody has to go after them.
Mickey, I'm sorry. Can you take over the meeting, because the storm left Nita's house is right above my house, and last time my lights were flickering. So if you can take over the meeting in case because if I get disconnected, everybody gets disconnected. It's crazy outside.
I also need to step away because I didn't say anything. I have water pouring into my house right now. I'm going to keep it going.
look.
I'm gonna try to come back, but when you guys heard all that, they've been in here like 3 times telling me.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. It's really bad. It's crazy.
Yeah. So I will be back.
Okay. So
This is Greg from Los Angeles. Mika, if I'm saying your name right, I know here they're regulated by the state. So can you file a complaint with the local government agency or whoever regulates title companies in your state?
I think on our side, it was just that it took them a super long time to finally record or else the name on the title. And it just felt very fishy the way things were done. And you're thinking, you know, we're on the point of selling this house now. We fixed it and all, and still, like, you know, we have to go back and forth and make sure that, oh, finally it has been recorded. But it took them like 4 months. How long was it, Aisa?
Wow.
Oh, wow.
it just got recorded I think the August 31st, but we bought the property February 24th. So
it took them that long.
Had not been recorded.
That leads me to believe that something happened, something was wrong. I mean, and I can't, you know, we want to think that, look at the best in everybody and think that everybody's out here and they're going to do everything to take care of the customers, et cetera. And then, you know, there's some bad people out here, bad title companies, et cetera. But when I hear something like that has taken 4 months to get a deed recorded or something recorded, I'm wondering if maybe they lost a document and had to trying to find it or something. Usually it's an underlying story behind that.
So basically what they did was I think the seller, they told the seller there was a lien. The seller decided to pay the water bill, but it was a tax lien. They had not paid the taxes. So Kedrick, my husband, he does the finances for this project. He's like, oh, we have a $1,600 credit with the water company. And I'm looking at it like, that doesn't make any sense. But then the title company guy is like, yeah, I had to pay taxes because they never paid the $1,600 taxes. So, you know, it's the older lady, I think she paid the wrong account. So he was all upset, the title guy, because he had to pay the $1,600 taxes because they didn't catch it.
That's right.
And now we were forced to pay the 2020 taxes, although we didn't want to because we were already on the market and we're under contract. If we don't have to pay taxes, we just take everything out at the table and just move on. But we had to come out of pocket now to pay taxes that we could have just paid at the table. So that was the issue. They didn't catch it. So it's their fault for not catching that.
That's right. That makes sense. Like I said, typically something like that happens. It's an underlying story to it. It's more behind the scenes. So they were probably trying to work with that person to recoup that $1,600 because if it's anything that has to be paid, you can't get that deed on record. And they were trying to prevent from paying it. So that makes more sense.
Yeah.
That makes
more sense. So legally, should we have waited? Like, was that legal for them to tell us that the title was clear? Should we have done that transaction, in February?
Well, basically, she's asking if should we have had closed it, although basically they closed the property, but the title was still not fully clear because there was still a tax lien on the property.
Yeah,
so technically they should not have closed us on the property in February.
Yeah, they shouldn't have, but it sounds like to me, if they took it to the closing table, that they had missed that and thought that it was clear and didn't identify that it was an issue until they went to record. So the title company probably didn't know about that issue until after the fact. And so when they took you to the closing table, they thought everything was good and it was going to be a home run, get the deed recorded and they sell into the sunset. But once they went to record, they couldn't record. They found out about the issue and then they had a problem and they were just trying to get it cleared up without them having to come out of pocket and front the money to get the deed recorded because that lien would have to be paid beforehand. That's what it sounds like was happening to me.
And also I'm thinking that if it's not a legal issue, then of course you have reviews for the company. I guess you go for in that respect, write some kind of review on some web platform, and some companies respond to the reviews. So
and also like the Maryland Land Title Association, that's the kind of like the governing body for title insurance. So you could reach out to them and they could probably look up the license number or what have you, and probably and reach out to the company and put some pressure on them to do some things as well. So.
Yeah, but
Was
that's what I was saying. We have now our attorney, somebody review and make sure everything's in place, because we don't want to have to go through that ever again. That was just
And it makes sense, because then by you're not getting that deed on record for a certain period of time. If those taxes come due, yes, then you have to pay those taxes before the deed can go on record. So it actually costs you. Now, it's on a good note, if you've already paid them taxes, now when you go to sell, you're going to get a proration of most of it back, but still it costs you to have to come out of pocket and pay it, which was an inconvenience to you, more so than anything. But yeah, definitely I would think that would be a case where you may have wanted to reach out to MLTA, but it was definitely more to behind the scenes. When I hear 4 months getting something on record, it's usually an underlying reason why that's not happening. It's something that they're trying to get fixed, and they don't want to identify or alert you to that.
Yeah, and if I may add to that, I had a similar issue as you had in Maryland. I went to settlement on a property, and issues like that will happen very often, where as I close on the property, I get a phone call 35 days later. And that's really the part that upset me. It was just way too long. And they say, well, we couldn't record your property because at the same time we're doing the closing, PG County puts a lien on the property for trash issues from the past, a property I bought at an auction. And it would happen to be a $4,500 charge, and couldn't get the property recorded. Although, I'm going to say it was tough because it happened right at the same time I was closing. The part that upset me was, why did it take that title company 35 days later to do that recording? That was way out of line. Long story short, I used them one time, and I haven't had that issue before. And the blame in there was them taking so long. I found out that they sub all the work out, and they were just getting behind, and that's really what caused the whole situation on my end at that time. I ended up, if I didn't pay that lien, that $4,500 lien, couldn't get the property recorded. So,
sorry.
Well,
Nita, is everything okay for you?
I'll be calling my contractor when we get off the phone.
Oh, sorry.
It's a cautionary tale about trying to work with a seller's title company.
Mm-hmm.
We put an offer on a property and asked, does the seller have a preferred title company, because we wanted to get into their good graces, and they said yes, so we used them, but we walked away from the contract within our contingency period and signed a mutual release agreement, and the seller took forever to sign it because the seller really didn't want to get out of the contract, but we had every right to get out of the contract because we had, this was land, and we had so many days to do a feasibility study, and my buyers decided they didn't want the land. They just found out too much information about it that they didn't like. And that was probably almost 6 weeks ago now, and we're still waiting to get the EMD back because the title company never said, okay, we need that release of deposit also, stating who was getting the funds back. Now, I had sent that to the listing agent prior to, well, I didn't send it along with the mutual release agreement, but I did send it because I said, well, they may want that. And we're still waiting. So sometimes when sellers have a relationship with a title company, that title company may not be working in the best interest of all parties.
Right, yeah, understood.
So I'm about to go back to the listing agent because when I went back and said, your client didn't sign that lease, the deposit release, and she said, oh, I thought, that came in. No, it did not. And then when I followed up again with her, because a few days later, nothing had happened. So I'm out of the country. Of course, we're in COVID. There aren't that many countries that will accept us anywhere, but Belarus, I don't know. but it's you just have to be careful, and it helps when you do have a relationship with the title company and you can trust them. So I really appreciate this session tonight, because I think it just allows us to really start developing relationships. And on a very positive note, I just closed, and Aisha and Mickey, we closed on our property on Friday with Stewart Title.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Good for
Who were you working with at Stewart?
Well, we were selling the property.
Oh, okay. Okay.
We closed in Crofton.
Oh, okay.
Crofton
That
office.
might have been me. Who was the seller's agent? I mean, the buyer's agent.
Did you close? I looked at you. Did you close at 5 o'clock on Friday?
Yeah, probably. So what is the property address? Was it in New Carrollton?
That's it. I'm the one with the mask on.
There you go.
Small world, huh?
I just emailed you all of your documents from closing just probably the last couple of hours ago.
We got the money on Monday, so it was all right.
Absolutely. I told you would have it on Monday.
That's funny.
Yeah, but I did want to shout out to Stewart Title. They did a great job. And
Thank you.
So I do want to ask quickly. So for some of the people that are not familiar, can you address the water escrow? Clarify what the water escrow is.
So we collect a water escrow just for the payment of the last water bill. Whatever, it can range anywhere from about $150 to $300, depending on the circumstance. And that's if you have a water bill. If it's a condo and there's no, it's covered within it, we're not collecting it. But then what we'll do is once we've paid the bill, reimburse you for whatever the difference is between that 300 or 150 and the actual bill.
So as a seller, I mean, when you're buying it, they take it from the seller or whoever, the wholesaler, if it's double closed.
Correct.
When you guys, when you finish your property and you're selling, they will hold one as well for you, and they reimburse you everything. Ground rent escrow. Are you guys familiar with those? Baltimore.
You got that, Nita? I'm gonna help Nita out with that one. The dreaded ground rent in Baltimore. So we hold a ground rent escrow in cases where the ground rent holder is not known. We're gonna hold 3 years of ground rent payment and $500 in legal fees, because 5 years later, 10 years later, no matter 20 years later, if that ground rent holder comes back, based off Maryland statute, they can only get up to 3 years worth of ground rent payment plus $500 in attorney's fees. And again, that's only in the case where the ground rent holder is not known. If the ground rent holder is known, then we're going to reach out to them, determine if it's any unpaid amounts that the seller owes that gets paid through the transaction.
Do you do the redemption? Because it's a whole process.
We will do redemption. So let me say this, we will do redemption through the transaction. So if we know who the ground rent holder is, we can do the redemption process. Redemption is a simple formula. It's usually 6% of what the yearly payment is. So if your yearly payment is $90, the redemption is $1,500. If the yearly payment is $120, the redemption is like $2,000, plus whatever fees that the redemption or the ground rent holder adds on to it. We will do it through the transaction if we know who the holder is. If we don't know who the ground rent holder is, we will not do it, because then it can become similar to a probate process. You got to submit before the state. It's a long 3, 4, 5, 6 month process to get the redemption done. And that's something that we don't do as a standalone process. But if anybody ever needs referrals, I have a good referral partner, an attorney in Baltimore City that, those standalone deed preparations, ground rent redemptions, that type stuff that I can refer people to.
Yep.
And if anybody wants more information on ground rent, I found a great article because I had a real estate agent who was working with an investor, and he was like, well, what is ground rent? I don't understand what this is. It talks about redemption. It talks about, everything associated with ground rent.
and for the people on here, just to give you a high level overview of what ground rent is, I keep referencing back to my attorney. He was very knowledgeable, and for all of his years he was here in the Baltimore area. But the whole theory behind the ground rent was back in the early development days of Baltimore, when people were trying to buy houses, this was a cost efficient way for people to buy homes. So you're buying the house, but you don't own the ground that it sits on. You pay an annual rent to whoever owns that ground. But that could save, say if you're back in the day, you're buying a row home, which are typical in Baltimore and typical of having ground rent, you're buying a row home for $45,000 versus buying it with the ground and it's $52,000 or 50, whatever. Then this was a way to help people to buy homes in a little more cost effective manner. Fortunately, Baltimore is one of the only places where you still see ground rent. And many companies, for instance, like with some of my rentals, I've had to, when I went to refinance over the years, they're requiring me to redeem it. So a lot of companies are trying to push it out of here, especially people who aren't, or lenders who aren't familiar with it and not from the Maryland area. They just can't conceptualize how that can be, and so they'll require you to redeem. But it's simply you own the house, but you are leasing the ground that it sits on. Those leases are 99-year leases, renewable forever. So if you don't redeem it, every year, twice a year, you're paying that ground rent amount to the ground rent holder.
Yeah, and so the Baltimore has it, but Baltimore is trying to get rid of them. So they really want to get, because it's a lot more data that they want to deal with. And then the PG County, there's a few section, and DC also. I found out. But Baltimore is the main one that has like a ton of those. But
yeah, Baltimore City and the county, and they've gone back and forth. There was a point where they tried to completely extinguish it, and the ground rent holders got together and went for the courts, and they were able to back it out so they could keep the ground rent. So it's that's been an ongoing battle over the years, but it's definitely unique. It takes some time to get used to it, and being from Baltimore, I'm finally used to it, but quite frankly, every one of my rental properties that I had ground rent. So it was a real common thing here. But, again, you own the home, but you don't own the land.
Right.
Aisha, I did just send you an article too, if you want to share it with anybody who's interested, that article I was referencing.
Perfect. And if you guys can share the presentation also, I would love that. Yeah. And last thing I was going to ask, CD. So just to clarify for some people that might not know, the CD is called the closing disclosure. So when you go to the table, you have the buyer's side and you have the seller's side. So if you guys want to just do a quick note on that, and then I think we should be done.
Nita, want me to take it? You got it?
Well, the CD, the seller, either side, it's going to show all of your debits and credits, what you owe money for and anything that you've put out. So if you're the buyer and you've put down a deposit, that's going to show as a credit for you on your closing disclosure. You will see the taxes. Typically, most of them are split unless, well, you know what, and I have to clarify this because in Frederick, we deal with a lot of builder cases, and many builders will have the buyer pay all taxes associated with the transfer. Now, if you're a first-time home buyer in the state of Maryland, the seller has to pay their portion of the state transfer tax, but the buyer does not. So you'll see on both sides that we have added and subtracted, like I said, debits and credits for different things. You will also see on there your loan as a credit. So, and then we take the total of the credits and subtract the debits, and that'll determine, what you may have to bring to the table or may not. To be honest with you, I did 2 this week or last week. The days are running together. They were VA loans, and they actually got money back at the very end because, they had put down a deposit, but because it was a VA loan, they can receive up to their deposit back, in which they did. But in most cases, if you're the buyer, you bring in something, to the table.
So you guys know when you're working with wholesalers or sellers directly, most of the time, one of the negotiation is for you as the investor to pay all transfer taxes. So just an FYI for those who are not familiar with that. So you might be the one just paying all the taxes. And altogether, it's like 1.9% or something like that, just about. I've been trying to compute it. And after all these years,
it depends on the county, because each of the counties are different. And you need to know when they change. Like Howard County recently had an increase in their taxes. Frederick County, effective October 1st, has increased theirs by an entire $1 per 500. So, I always tell people, as these are coming up, we want to be cognizant of those, because we could have a shortage for our taxes when we get to settlement table, because, September 30th, it's not the same price as it is on October 1st.
Right. And then another thing too that I've seen is the counties, after the property sells, the buyer, and I tell all my buyers, if by about 2 months later, they send you an updated tax property value, because they're looking at how much the property sold. So I've seen you guys, the title companies, actually get that, a bigger reserve for taxes, just to help with some of these adjustments. Montgomery County and PG County, notorious. A few months later, they send them, and then they just kick up the property value. So that's another thing I've seen them do. So just be aware. Any
And you see that too.
I have a quick question.
Uh-huh.
Nita or Marvin, if we are looking at vacant land for new developments, does the company provide services like pre-title or pre-closing services, where you can check out the property, the vacant land, and see if it's really kosher, who the owner is, things like that?
I'm going to say let's talk and reach out to Nita or I, and let's talk, because so it's not a typical service that we offer, but if you're going to buy some land and want to have title work ran, etc., it may be a case where we just link you up with one of our abstractors to have them do a search and get you over a snapshot of what's going on with the property. So I'm going to say let's take that on a case-by-case scenario and see what the situation is, and it may make sense for you to engage Stewart Title. It may make sense for us to set you up with one of our abstract partners who can just get you a snapshot of the property and what's going on with it, so you don't go in blind.
Great, thanks a lot. So we will connect. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. Nita, Marvin, thank you so much. Do you guys have anything you want to close with?
Well, I just want to say thank you all for taking the opportunity to hear what we have to share. If you have any further questions, feel free. I hope you were able to at least take down my phone number. For those who have a pen and paper nearby, I can be reached at 301-514-0521. So, because stuff pops up, I know, there might have been something you didn't hit you until you go to bed tonight. So feel free to reach out. If I can't answer it, Marvin can't answer it, we can find somebody. We have attorneys on staff who could potentially answer those questions for you as well.
They do have also the email from this invitation, URCC. I will share it again.
Okay.
Yep.
Sounds good.
Any other question, you guys, or are we good?
We're good. Thank
right.
you for coming. It was very, very knowledgeable. I mean, I didn't know much about the title companies and also.
I do all the paperwork, so they just kind of sit in the shadow and they're like, did you review it? I was like, oh, yeah, I'm reviewing it.
and then Isa comes up with, the not so well part that wasn't done. And I'm like, what? Like, really? They can do that?
Yeah, I'm like, all right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank
nice
you.
to see you all. And
Thanks, everybody.
good night.
Have a wonderful evening.
You too.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.